at his family's lake house. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway for all of us before we went our separate ways for school. The house was remote, surrounded by dense forest, and sat right on the edge of a serene lake. It was perfect for a big gathering. Alex invited around 50 people from our graduating class. The first night was a blast. Everyone was swimming, grilling, and playing music. As the night went on, people spread out across the property, some near the bonfire, others exploring the woods or hanging out on the dock. I arrived early with my friends, Sarah and Tom, to help set up. As the party got into full swing, we noticed a few unfamiliar faces, but Alex assured us they were friends of friends. Still, some of these strangers seemed a bit older, which felt odd, but we didn't think much of it. Around midnight, a dense fog rolled in from the lake, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of us. The music played on, but it felt like we were isolated in our little pockets of fun. I was sitting by the bonfire with a few people when we heard a loud splash from the lake, followed by a high-pitched scream. We all jumped up and ran towards the sound, but the fog made it hard to see anything. We called out, but there was no response. Alex ran inside to grab a flashlight. When he came back, we spread out, searching the shoreline. Eventually, we found Sarah on the dock, trembling and soaking wet. She told us she saw a figure in the water, someone who wasn't part of the party, who had grabbed her ankle and tried to pull her in. She managed to kick free and swim back to the dock. The mood shifted after that. People started talking about leaving, but the fog was so thick it didn't feel safe to drive. Alex and I decided to check all the rooms in the house to make sure everyone was accounted for. That's when we noticed something disturbing. Muddy footprints leading from the dock, through the back door, and into the house. We followed the footprints up the stairs, our hearts pounding. They led to the attic, a place that no one had any reason to go. The attic door was slightly ajar. Alex and I exchanged nervous glances, and then slowly pushed the door open. Inside, it was pitch black, except for the thin beam of our flashlight. The light landed on a pair of eyes reflecting back at us from the far corner. Alex whispered, "Who's there?" But there was no response. Instead, the figure moved swiftly, knocking over some boxes as it lunged towards us. We stumbled back, slamming the attic door shut and pushing a heavy dresser against it. Our hearts were racing as we heard the pounding from the other side. We ran downstairs, gathering everyone in the living room. Alex called the police, but with the fog, it took them over an hour to arrive. During that time, we huddled together, every creak and groan of the old house putting us on edge. When the police finally got there, they searched the house and surrounding woods but found no one. The muddy footprints and overturned boxes in the attic were the only evidence someone had been there. The police suggested it was probably a drifter or someone who had seen the party from the lake and decided to crash it. But the unsettling part was that none of us saw anyone leave, and with the dense fog, it was like they had vanished into thin air. For the rest of the weekend, we couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We stuck together and no one slept much. By the time Sunday rolled around, we were all eager to leave. That weekend was supposed to be a fun farewell to summer, but instead, it left us with a chilling memory that none of us would ever forget. As we drove away, the fog lifted, revealing the serene beauty of the lake and the forest. It was hard to believe such a peaceful place could hold such terror. But every time I think back to that night, I can't help but wonder who or what was lurking in the fog, watching us from the shadows. There's a peaceful, secluded hiking trail not far from my house. I often go there on weekends to clear my head and enjoy nature. This particular Saturday was perfect. Sunny, mid-70s, and not a cloud in the sky. I parked in the small gravel lot at the trailhead, where there were usually only 1 or 2 cars. Today, however, there was a white van parked at the far end. It seemed out of place, but I shrugged it off and started my hike. About 20 minutes into my hike, I came across a man sitting on a fallen log just off the trail. He looked to be in his late 40s, with unkempt hair and a scruffy beard. He wore a weathered flannel shirt and jeans, and his boots were caked with mud. He smiled at me as I approached, and I gave him a polite nod. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said, his voice gravelly. "Yeah, it is," I replied, not stopping my stride. I wanted to keep moving, but he stood up and stepped onto the trail, blocking my path. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Just out for a walk," I said, trying to be friendly but firm. "Enjoying the weather." He smiled again, but there was something off about it. "Mind if I join you?" I shook my head. "I prefer to hike alone, thanks." He stared at me for a moment, then stepped aside, allowing me to pass. I quickened my pace, glancing over my shoulder every so often to make sure he wasn't following me. After a few minutes, I felt a bit more at ease, convinced I was alone again. The trail looped around a small pond, and I stopped for a moment to take in the view. The surface of the water was smooth and reflective, disturbed only by the occasional ripple from a fish. I took a deep breath, savoring the tranquility, when I heard a rustling in the bushes behind me. I turned around, expecting to see a deer or some other animal. Instead, I saw the man again, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me. My heart skipped a beat, and I instinctively took a step back. "Hey!" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. "Are you following me?" He didn't respond. He just kept staring with that unsettling smile. I decided I had enough and started walking briskly back the way I came. But every time I looked over my shoulder, he was there, maintaining a constant distance. I pulled out my phone, intending to call for help, but of course there was no reception in the middle of the woods. My mind raced as I tried to figure out what to do. I remembered a small ranger station about a mile further up the trail. I picked up my pace, practically jogging now with the man still in pursuit. As I approached the station, relief washed over me. The small wooden building came into view, and I saw a ranger's truck parked outside. I ran up the steps and pounded on the door. A middle-aged ranger opened it, looking surprised. "Can I help you?" he asked. "There's a man following me," I said, breathless. "He's back there, somewhere in the woods." The ranger stepped outside and looked around. "Where is he now?" I turned to point in the direction I had come from, but the man was nowhere in sight. The ranger frowned. "Are you sure you weren't imagining things?" "No," I insisted. "He was definitely there." The ranger nodded and went back inside to grab his radio. "Stay here," he instructed as he called for backup. I stood on the porch, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. My heart was still pounding, but I felt safer now that the ranger was here. He came back out a moment later, accompanied by another ranger. "Let's go check it out," the second ranger said. "You stay here," he told me. They headed down the trail, and I watched them until they disappeared from view. I paced back and forth, anxiously waiting for their return. After what felt like an eternity, they came back, shaking their heads. "We didn't find anyone," the first ranger said, "but we'll keep an eye out." I thanked them and walked back to my car, constantly looking over my shoulder. The next day, I saw a news report about a missing hiker. The description matched the man I had seen, and the report mentioned the white van. He had been living out there, preying on unsuspecting hikers. I realized how close I had come to becoming one of his victims.